Hi guys, thank you for joining us today and welcome to our spooktacular October AuthorConnect Chat. I'm Michelle, Chief of Staff at BookPal, and today I have the pleasure of introducing Scott Belsky, author of The Messy Middle.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Scott is an entrepreneur, author, investor, chief product officer at Adobe, and venture partner with venture capital from Benchmark. Scott co-founded Behance in 2006 and served as CEO until Adobe acquired the company in 2012. Millions of people use Behance to showcase and discover top talent across different creative mediums. Scott is also an early investor and advisor in Pinterest, Uber, and Periscope, among other several fast-growing startups. To kick off this chat, Scott will begin with a presentation on The Messy Middle, then we'll jump into a question and answer session. Feel free to submit your questions at any time during the webinar, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Just as a reminder, in case you need to jump off early, we'll be sending out the webinar recording to all attendees next week. All right, Scott, you're up.
Great. Well, thanks again for having me, and I'm excited to speak with all of you about this challenge of crafting product in the messy middle. And the fonts may be a little off. If that's the case, I apologize in advance. But we'll work with what we've got here. And this is a little section from The Messy Middle, which is a book that I've worked on over a number of years. That just came out in early October. So for the purposes of this discussion, I figured I'd focus on the challenges of building a great product in this very volatile middle part of the journey. Let me start by just saying that there is a myth of what a great entrepreneurial, bold, creative venture journey looks like. And it's something like this, that you have this great idea in the beginning, then you realize how hard it is, and you kind of go to the, this low, of reality, and then it's just a gradual, linear rise towards the finish. When in fact, of course, the reality is a little more like this, where it's just a pitfall after pitfall, valley and then peak, valley, peak. Hopefully, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and if so, you achieve what I call the elusive positive slope of journeys, which is that you're actually heading in the right direction. And but it's this middle volatility that really fascinates me. And how do you endure those lows? How do you keep the team engaged, keep the team together? And how do you optimize the heck out of everything that works? And that really is the ultimate playbook, I believe, for any major venture or product turnaround, is developing the tactics for helping the team endure those lows and mine them for every gem that's there. And then how do you focus on anything that's working and figure out why it's working and what you can do to make it better, and ultimately distinguish yourself as both a leader, your team, and your product. And so that's really what we're going to talk about today. Now, just a quick intro about me, and I'll just break my my background into 3 phases that I think relate to the topic here of product. Phase 1 was to organize and empower the creative world to make ideas happen, and this was the very much journey of Behance. Behance is a platform now of many millions of creative professionals who showcase and discover their creative work, and it's part of Adobe. But many people don't know that Behance started as a paper products business. We were bootstrapping ourselves by selling notebooks and actual physical products for creative people to help them be more organized. And then there was a book, Making Ideas Happen, out in 2008 that was devoted to exploring productivity in creative teams and how some of those productive creative teams operate. That was followed by a conference devoted to organization in the creative world called 99U. And then the product that we're most known for after the conference, which is the network. And this is also a platform to help the creative world get organized and all the work that people do in their portfolios and showcase it online and in their own personal portfolios. But the theme is really organization. And I would say the product philosophy that emerged from my first chapter of my career was that great products these days, or great companies rather, can be mission-centric and medium agnostic, meaning that if you have a simple mission like organize the creative world, or whatever your mission is, these days you can pursue it through many different mediums. whether it's a conference or a paper product or a book or a digital platform. And I think that there's so many reasons why that's easier to do now than ever before, thanks to technology. So the second phase, I would call support mission-driven teams, and this is my phase as an investor. And whether it was working with the team at Pinterest in the earliest stages of the company, or watching the volatility of some other companies and watching the brand ethos of other companies, I really started to become very interested in the process of stewarding a product over the course of the life cycle of a business and managing the volatility without letting it interfere with the quality of the product. Periscope is another team I worked super closely with over the years, and now as a part of Twitter. Let's see that the philosophy that came out for this was just that the preserving the integrity of a great product in the messy middle is really just as hard as building one. It's hard to build a product and make it great and simple and compelling. It's even hard to keep it that way. We'll talk about more of that later. The third phase of my career has been to help make the next generation of creative products as Chief Product Officer at Adobe. So Behance was acquired by Adobe in 2012, and we came to the company, and of course I wasn't sure whether I would stay with my focus on Behance or whether it would expand. And over the years, it did expand to the services that make up our offering called Creative Cloud. And Creative Cloud, of course, includes products like Photoshop and Illustrator and Lightroom, and with it, the challenges of bringing a lot of these products to mobile and building a lot of services that help the creative world, embrace new mediums and really, lead the cutting edge of creativity, which has always been a passion of mine. Making our products more accessible and helping people navigate them and learn them and work in a workflow with their colleagues. These are all the types of challenges that now I have been facing, in this new role. And I would say so far, still in it, but the product philosophy that's emerged here is that products can be powerful enough for professionals, yet accessible to everyone. And that's something I've become very passionate about. So let's talk product, and I'm sure that folks joining us, some of them might be in the digital product world, some of them might have a physical product or a service that they deliver to folks. Whatever your product is, my goal is to impart a few thoughts that might be helpful to you in this journey of volatility that we discussed. And the funny thing about this journey is that, in the beginning, great products often come about because, it's simple. You have a plan, and then, of course, in the real volatility, you realize that you can't really plan, and you have to always ebb and flow at the whims of where your customers are going, where society is going, where the market is going. Similarly, you're very self-reliant in the beginning. This is where you feel like you have control over your own destiny, and then you realize actually you're more reliant on your team than you might even care to admit, and that's a great thing. And you realize in the beginning, oftentimes at the founding stages of a new product or service, you have this incredible insight that allows you to make something beautifully simple and compelling that customers flock to. And then over the course of the time, as you hear the needs of power users, customers, the vocal minority of customers that are always asking you to change something, to do something, that's when you start to add complexity to the product. And that's really where a lot of great products start to suffer and ultimately die. So one of the things that we're asking here is, how do you build great products in the messy middle and not really screw them up? How do you make sure you can defy that tendency to add complexity and make a product really hard to use? In other words, how do you defy that product life cycle where users flock to a simple product, that product takes its users for granted and adds features to satisfy power users, and then ultimately users flock to simple product? And this is actually the product life cycle that powers Silicon Valley and startups that compete with incumbents by doing something just much simpler, because they frankly just don't have all the baggage that other folks had. So prioritizing the first mile of your customer's experience is extraordinarily important and is one of the ultimate powers in keeping a product simple. And what do I mean by the first mile? Well, it's the onboarding, it's what customers see when they first come into the product, it's the video that they see, it's the copy, it's the default experience, it's all of these different things. And the ultimate irony is that your journey making the product and your customer's experience using the product, that the last mile of your journey making the product is oftentimes thinking about the first mile of your customer's experience using the product. It's only right before we launch our products that we start to think, oh my goodness, what should our tour be? What should our welcome screen be? And it's really crazy because these are all the potential customers. This is the top of the funnel. This is the most precious customer experience imaginable. And yet we spent the whole time making this deep product experience when in fact, like, that first mile is really all that matters to most customers, at least for a period of time. In the first mile, these natural human tendencies that we have really take over our desires. We want to just be efficient. We don't want to make decisions. We want to be recognized. We want to have options. We want to look good. We don't want to take time to understand stuff. And so if you can accommodate some of these first mile desires, you actually can engage and retain your customers over time. And so that's why I want to talk to you today about 3 principles that I think are extremely important about that first mile experience of your product, of keeping your product simple and accessible and not screwing them up in the middle journey amidst all that volatility where we tend to throw complexity at every problem we find. And so the first principle that we can talk about is the fact that in the first 15 to 30 seconds, we are all lazy, vain, and selfish in the experiences that we have in other people's products. And so let me explain to you what I mean. In the first 15 seconds, we are lazy in the sense that we don't have time to read or learn something new. There's so many bad onboardings to products that we've all probably seen. And then there are instructional videos, and there are multiple paragraphs, and read more pages with more explanation of what a product does and mean. Now, the only thing better than that is to show rather than explain how your product works. And some companies do this with tooltips and popovers and things like that explain to you, that show you how something works, as opposed to just having you read something. And the only thing better than that is to actually do it for your customers. And so a lot of the best products out there now start with templates and smart selections, as opposed to having people manually enter text. And then this notion of presumptuous defaults. What does that mean? That means that whatever you come in and see first is likely the thing that you are ultimately wanting to choose and use. And these are clever ways that we can accommodate the laziness that customers feel in that first 15 seconds. The second feeling, the reality of the first 15 seconds for all of our experiences of new products, is this sense of vanity. This better make you look good and quickly. Now, there's this term that I like to use in building products called ego analytics. And basically what it means is that we like to know that we are loved. We like to know that we are liked, that our content is being liked and appreciated. And this actually drives a lot of engagement and utilization of products. Now, it's not a great thing in terms of how we spend our time sometimes. It also is not necessarily a great statement on humanity, but it's true. And look no further than a product like Instagram, where when we come in, we're constantly looking at how many people liked our images. That little pop-up at the bottom is a hit of dopamine to tell us that what we're doing matters and that people are connecting and appreciating our work. And if you look at a graph of a product like Instagram, and you look at where people really log in and engage most in the product, it's actually after they just posted something. So we'll go in and see other people's content and enjoy it, but then every now and then when we post something ourselves, our engagement and utilization of the product goes up dramatically, and which suggests that one of the maybe dirty little secrets of at least the consumer social media content type technologies that we use is that these products are as much about seeing who saw our content as they are about sharing and seeing others people's content. And that's an important realization, because when you're building a product for your customers, in order to overcome this need for vanity in the first 15 seconds, you need to merchandise your customers' awesomeness and success and progress to your customer. They have to be in your product and feel like they are being successful. So the last thing is selfishness, and the fact that in the first 15 seconds, we all do have a bout of selfishness. We need to benefit quickly from spending any time on this product we are using. we are all skeptical of long-term promises, and the product needs to deliver value now, right? That's how we feel as customers. And so, sorry there. So when we, let's see. Well, I just showed a Pinterest example. I'm not able to go back, I don't think. Let's see here. Am I able to go back? Nope. I just, sorry, I went through a few examples of Pinterest. You know, Pinterest was now is known as a discovery tool. It's how we see other people's interests. But over time, but actually in the beginning, it was more just a utility for bookmarking and for building your own collection. The value proposition was immediate. It was here's something that for you to use now. I also showed just a couple examples just now. Sorry, I clicked through them really quickly of Stripe and Square. You know, two products that have a value proposition for the developer or the merchant. It's like get paid faster was what Square said to its merchants. That selfishness really made them adopt that new product, that new technology. And Stripe went to developers and said, integrate commerce into your website with 2 lines of code. And that selfishness is really what helped that product take off. And in that first 30 seconds, helped people really understand and get value out of it. So the point being here that marketing and copy should be born with or in the product team. It's part of the product experience. And this is where a lot of teams make big mistakes, is they outsource their copy. They just assume that it's someone else's job. And in fact, it is the job of the product team because it's part of the product experience. So that's principle number 1, thinking about that first 15 to 30 seconds and accommodating for the laziness, vanity, and selfishness of customers. Principle number 2 is to stay grounded by your newest cohort of new customers. So think about that. Making simple things is really, really complicated, but even more so is staying simple. Staying simple is so complicated because the more options we add to the product and to our customers, the more problems they are going to have. And so the shortcut to staying simple is obsessing over your newest users, your newest customers, while remembering that every new cohort of new customers is, in fact, different. And if you look at the classic Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm mentality, and you think about the types of customers in each of these categories, what they would expect in that first mile of their customer experience is unique to each of these segments. I mean, innovators are extraordinarily forgiving, and early adopters, they'll put up with bugs. They don't even need tours. They'll go in and figure out the product on their own. And then you have the majority cohorts that really need to be walked through. They come in their daily life. They have no patience tolerance, and they will not give you any benefit of the doubt. So these new cohorts and users are very, very different. And so when you think about a product like Twitter, you know, Twitter, I feel is like the perfect product for about 150 million people. And then at some point, new cohorts of new customers started to join from that late majority that didn't want to curate their timeline and follow accounts. They just wanted the news, or they just wanted to see what everyone's talking about. And it was one of those examples where it was the perfect onboarding. You know, they really had a great first mile experience for a very large set of cohorts of new customers. And then at some point, it became the wrong approach, and the product started to grow more slowly. So what we need to do is prioritize problems for new users over problems for power users. And I really like to encourage teams, and it sounds crazy, but to preserve 50% of their focus on the new user's first mile experience at all times. Because if they are in fact growing, and almost every company that I work with aspires to grow and still believes that they're 1% in their journey and they only have 1% of the customer base they ultimately want to have, well, then they need to be able to constantly iterate that first mile experience and make it extraordinary. I think about this all the time in my new job, or not so new anymore, a year in at Adobe as Chief Product Officer, thinking about the first mile of products like Photoshop. You know, look at this welcome screen for Photoshop. It really doesn't help you. It doesn't tell you what to do. It doesn't embrace you as a new customer without any experience in the product. And so we've been really thinking about reimagining that first customer's first mile, or that customer's first mile rather. You know, what should they be welcomed with in the initial state? How should it transition as they become a more frequent user of the product? And so now we're exploring new ways of prompting the customer to take a tour, drop a file and get started, learn the basics. And then of course, this changes with them as they become a more active customer. One of my favorite edicts for this this insight, this principle, is that the devil is in the defaults. Whatever you give your customers or users or clients by default is what they will typically just stick with. And I remember in LinkedIn, they have that thing at the top that tells you, is your profile almost done, and you have 2 more steps to take to complete your profile, and everyone can click out of that, but it's there by default. And I remember hearing like 80% of something people on LinkedIn still have it there because no one changes what they're given by default. The third principle is that we favor novelty, yet we cling to familiarity. And so think about this. One of my mentors, Seth Godin, likes to call this the lizard brain, and he says that it's something that makes us cling towards things that are familiar and recoil whenever we see something new. It's this ancestral part of our brain that protects us by looking at things that are foreign and keeping a distance. And I think that I learned this the hard way with Behance. In the early days, we called the fields that you would choose to join when you join the platform, like illustration or fashion or photography, we called them realms, creative realms. And we had groups that we called circles. And we went through years where people just were not sure, what is a creative realm? How do you even pronounce creative realm? And what is a circle? And this is even before Google had circles. No one really knew what I meant by circles. And so ultimately we realized you have to adopt familiar patterns, as creative and novel and innovative as you might want to be in your team and your service and your product and your terminology. Creative fields made it perform better, made everyone get through our first mile faster. When we turned circles into groups, people resonated more closely with the concept, which suggests that familiarity is the friend of utilization. Once we see familiar patterns, we engage, we utilize those features. I was looking around my apartment, and what did I find? I found some funny things. My remotes have a party button. It's a very clean and clear way of demonstrating or communicating to me, the customer, that this turns everything on. I could have all these knobs and whistles, but instead they gave me a party button. In my kitchen, I have a button on a toaster that's called a bit more. And I was like, wow, it's so refreshing to not have to think about, just to have a familiar concept, a bit more. That is so familiar. It's what everyone wants. And instead of giving me a more mechanical way of doing this, they gave me a very familiar pattern to capitalize on. But while familiarity is the friend of utilization, it is the enemy of innovation. And look no further than focus groups and our tendency to test what is familiar. But that is what a focus group is. When you get a group together, what you're doing is you're seeing whether they recognize and feel comfortable and familiar with what you're showing them. All a focus group will really tell you is how familiar is something. So when you actually want to focus group something that is entirely new, you can expect that people will recoil because of their lizard brain. And so we have to remember to adopt familiar patterns whenever possible, and to only force a new behavior when it powers a unique value. And a good example of this is Periscope. I remember when the product came out, it was in that whole selfie generation phase where every video product, every photo product was a selfie product. And it would open up, and what would you see first? Yourself. And Periscope, when they launched, they opened seeing out instead of in. They used the outside camera. You saw what was in the user's eyes as opposed to seeing the user. And a lot of people, when they got this product to test, they said, wait, you messed up. It should actually default towards you. It should be in selfie mode by default. That's the mainstream. But this is the thing that they wanted to force as a unique attribute of the product. The idea of the product was teleportation, seeing the world through someone else's eyes. And as a result, they defaulted facing out, and that really distinguished Periscope from other products on the market. So again, the fonts went off here because the correct fonts weren't installed in this presentation when it was loaded. But transformational products are, in fact, I believe, 90% accommodating and 10% retraining. They really use familiar patterns in every moment they can, familiar design, just everything should be familiar. But then there's a few things that are uniquely different that ultimately distinguish the future of the product. And that's where we want to retrain customers to think differently. And so to recap here, what must we do to be great stewards of product in the messy middle? Well, we have to have faith in our customers, but not in the first 15 to 30 seconds. Let's make sure that we ground ourselves with the reality of what they need to succeed in that limited amount of time. We need to stay grounded by the newest customer's experience. And I talked about how we prioritize the first mile of the experience. We need to really scrutinize the defaults that we give our customers in any sort of digital product. What do they get and see first? We need to innovate, but keep the core mechanics and the language familiar. And we have to remember that we are creating for people. So I always encourage teams, as crazy as it sounds, to be as human as they possibly can. Final words for product leaders in the first and last 60 seconds we have here, but is don't make so many of the small decisions at the expense of making big decisions, and also don't fall into the trap of always pushing off decisions. I will tell you that decisiveness is one of the most important attributes in creative teams, and you should prompt decisiveness. If your boss is if you have a boss and the boss is not making a decision, then tell the boss when you need a decision by. Short circuit your team's reward system. It's so important to recognize that the long-term vision is only enough to get us to start something. It's not enough to get us to do something day after day for year after year. You have to short circuit it. There's a ton in my book about short circuiting reward systems and teams to help them endure those lows. We don't have time for it now. Resourcefulness over resources. If resources, you can throw resources, you can raise tons of money, you can throw money at problems. Resources are carbs. Resourcefulness is muscle. Resourcefulness sticks with you over time. It is a valuable force that you once developed in your team, and how you manage and build products, you can leverage it going forward, and it will not escape you. And finally, last but not least, everyone, gain confidence from doubt. It's those rare moments in your career where people tell you that you are crazy, and you're either crazy or you're really onto something. And it's these moments where we need to learn to gain confidence from the doubt we are getting, and to recognize that nothing extraordinary is ever achieved through ordinary means. And so with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me for this short BookPal webinar.
Awesome. Well, that was amazing, Scott. Thank you so much for sharing some of those nuggets. I love the summary at the end, because we have a couple questions coming up that hit on a couple of those points.
Sure. I have about 3 minutes. Let's do it.
All right, 3 minutes. So this question from Cassie is, what are the ways that you can motivate and inspire your team when you're stuck in the messy middle and don't have big milestones to celebrate?
Well, that is really about the short circuiting the reward system. And I'll give you, one example was Behance, is a made up word. And we would always type in Behance into Google, and it would always say, do you mean enhance? Do you mean enhance? And so our team was determined to someday no longer be a mistake in Google. And that was a much easier, shorter term goal than, say, having huge amounts of customers and huge amounts of revenue and everything else that was so far off in the long term. And so we hacked our reward system by identifying all these short-term goals that we could optimize towards that would incent the right behaviors. There were bets that we would make about things people would do when we reached certain numbers of customers. There are all kinds of fun little things that we did to ultimately hack our reward system to keep ourselves engaged over the long term.
Awesome. And I recall there's a section about a bet for you to eat meat if you hit a certain milestone. So as a lifelong vegetarian.
Yes, that was a great example. People got very excited about the process of me eating meat, which is pretty funny.
So you'll have to read the book in order to find out whether or not Scott ate the meat.
Exactly.
So I have one more question. Scott, you worked with companies like Airbnb, Pinterest, Uber, and Sweetgreen. What would the #1 takeaway be that you learned from working with them?
Yeah, sure. Well, these are mostly friends and folks, some of whom I've invested in, some of whom I, just advise informally. And for the book, I interviewed well over 100 people that had, wild journeys. And, I think it's what's interesting is that everyone's so obsessed with the starts and finishes of everything, but it's really this interesting middle volatility that I think has the most to teach us. I think from a lot of these folks, one of the things I admired was their ability to use a playbook until it was no longer the right playbook to run their business, and then to discard it and to really transform themselves as leaders. I'm really impressed by teams that optimize how they work as opposed to just fix things that are broken, because that is the difference between a good team and a great team. You know, great teams are actually more focused on the things that work than the things that don't, and gradually triangulate towards the one thing they're best in the world at. And a lot of the leaders that I met over the course of this project fit that to a T.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. That's
Thank
about all
you.
the time we have today. I do encourage everyone to check out Scott's book, The Messy Middle, which is available online on our website at bkp.al/messymiddle. Or you can shoot me an email at michelle@book-pal.com. I think Scott's book in particular really stands out because, as you touched on during your presentation, it focuses on a part of growing a business that is so often neglected, which is that the gritty, long duration of trying to get to that end goal and really have those big wins. So I really encourage everyone to check it out. It's written in a bunch of quick, short chapters, so you can really pick it up at any point in the book and grab a couple nuggets here and there. So yeah, thank you so much, Scott, for joining us.
Thank you again.
All right, everybody, have a good day, and we will send out the recording next week. Bye.